This is one video I hoped I would never have to record. On the 31st of August, just after 6:30 local time at Spa-Francorchamps, Anthoine Hubert passed away from injuries he received in a crash in the Formula 2 race. It's a very sad set of circumstances. It was an incredibly difficult weekend to be a part of. Obviously there was a lot of waiting around, hoping that Antoine was going to be okay, a lot of prayers and a lot of hopes that he was going to be alright, and unfortunately that wasn't to be the case. It was a difficult 24 hours after that as well, as all the drivers, teams, everyone who knew Antoine so well had to come to terms with such a great loss. And that's where we're going to start today. As much as we're upset that Antoine has gone, it's important that we celebrate his life and what a fantastic person he was off the track as well as on the track. It's very easy to pick up a piece of paper with some results on and see that Antoine was the GP3 champion in 2018, probably his crowning achievement. But it's not very easy for some people at home to know what he was like outside of the track. So joining me is Jake Boxall-Legge, who was the GP3 press officer in 2018 and had a very keen insight into how Antoine was, all of the fun videos you used to get to do on the Twitter and social media. We're going to talk about Antoine's life and hopefully let you know him a little bit better. So Jake, I mentioned that results are just a sheet of paper. Antoine, some of the words that have been used to describe him since his death is humble, a lot of humility, just a real general nice guy around the paddock, someone you would always go and find and say hello to, and was pretty much always smiling as well. What are your experiences of him from being in the paddock?
Just that, he was one of the nicest people in the paddock, and I remember when I first joined GP3, we were like, okay, he's the guy that's most likely going to win it this year, and he went and did it. He did everything we expected. Such a nice bloke, genuine guy. I think I first spoke to him in, I think it's the pit lane of Barcelona during a test, and we were waiting for running to get going because there was a rallycross round that had put a load of mud on the track, and we're all congregating around going, oh, come on, something happened.
Yeah.
And then I think my first interview with a GP3 driver was him. There was a brilliant, a little funny anecdote about that when Alexa, who was the head of comms for F2 and GP3, messaged him to say, you've got an interview with Jake, and he turned up with Jake Hughes in tow because he said, well, you said I have an interview with Jake, here he is. So we had to send Jake on his way, but when Antoine sat down and we had a chat, it was just a fantastic interview. He was polite, he was everything you would want from an interviewee, and he said to us, if I win GP3 this year, I'll move up into the Renault Sport Academy, and he did.
It was a fantastic season for him, 2018, but it's not the only great year he had, and he had lots of other good results. And I think, as well as we said, we shouldn't just dwell on a piece of paper. It's important that we do celebrate the results that he did have. But before we do, I think the anecdote that I can bring is football. We used to talk about football so often, and Antoine's from Lyon, big Lyon fan, and I'm a Liverpool fan, so we had a pre-season friendly against each other earlier this year, and Liverpool were the runaway winners, and I definitely didn't let Antoine forget about that when I saw him in the paddock next. But the last conversation I had with him not long before he got in the car actually, was about cycling, because he'd been cycling with the Renault Sport Academy in the Alps, as I know you were following on Instagram as well.
Yeah.
And I think they'd done almost 700 kilometres of cycling over 6 days. And I said I was happy with my laptop and my fatty food, and not worrying too much about what I was eating and things like that. And he was asking if he could join us, and I'd be so much happier if he was a journalist now than he was a racing driver, because he'd still be with us. So Antoine's results, I guess we can start with 2013. It was his first year in cars, and he was a champion straight out of the box in French Formula 4 Championship. I have to admit, he wasn't really on my radar at that point, and I'm pretty sure he wasn't on yours either. But he had 2 years in Formula Renault after that with Tech 1, a good team, but I think 5th was his best championship position, and then moved into European Formula 3 with Van Amersfoort. I think we both remember the Norris Ring win vaguely, and that was his only win that year, and then stepped up into GP3, probably in the hardest GP3 setup you could possibly be in, with Jack Aitken and George Russell, Narei Fukuzumi. So I think what I saw in 2018 was the kind of the start of a blossoming of a really intelligent driver mainly, but a driver who really judged races well. He was quick, but I think the last 2 years, 2018 and 2019, we've really seen him take it up another level, and his speed has really shown. I think his early junior single-seater career was a little bit kind of lacklustre. There's a little bit up and down, not really making the most of his opportunities, struggling a little bit with budget, something Antoine's always had. But the last 2 years have really been something else. What were your memories in terms of on the track? Do you have a race that really stands out that makes you think of Antoine?
Well, I do remember 2017 as well, when he was in the battle for the lead in Monza with Jack and George at ART.
Yeah, he just missed out, didn't he? It was a close one.
It was a three-way battle, and it was absolutely brilliant. And then when I joined GP3 and got to know Antoine a little bit, as you say, very, very cerebral, intelligent driver. And we were always there just going, when is he going to win? And we got to Barcelona, and I think he was in with a shout of pole, and Nikita Mazepin ended up winning, and we sort of didn't really expect that. We were like, come on, Antoine, just grab a win. And he did win in Paul Ricard after Boccaccio was disqualified, but by his own admission, he wasn't massively happy with winning like that. But then that win in Silverstone, when I'm sure you remember this better than I do, but he prevailed through the safety car period. He started on pole as well, and he just managed that race to absolute pure perfection. GP3 is a bit of a weird one in that the tyres don't go off quite as quickly as they do in Formula 2 as such, but there is a point where you just go, oh, I haven't got any tyres left. But he knew what to do. So it was a long time coming, but he did it to perfection, and obviously he went on and won. I think
it's one of my... I think it's the time I remember Antoine being the happiest was actually after that race, not even after the winning the GP3 title, because I think it was a load off his mind that he proved to himself that he could win as much as everybody else. I think it's a fair assumption that his earlier junior single seater career, it was lacklustre, and I think it was a little bit disappointing from that point of view. But I think the last 2 years have really started to persuade people that he is that talent and he has got that speed. I think Silverstone was part of the fact that he was proving to himself that he could win as much as anybody else. But also it was that fantastic weekend where it was his granddad's birthday, his brother's graduation ceremony back in France, and also France were doing so well in the World Cup, which he loved to throw in the face of all the English people. Oh, absolutely unbearable. And he was wearing the French shirt under his overalls for some pictures and things like that, wasn't he, as well? So that race really stands out for me. And I think the race that really showed me that turnaround was kind of complete and he really was a top driver now was Bahrain, the first F2 race of the year. So as you know, the tyres are basically impossible to really get your head around in Formula 2. You have no data in the car and you can only look at data outside of the car, and the conditions change so much. You're on different tyres from practice to qualifying, and then the race you obviously have the tyre change. So it's such a complicated set of circumstances, and that's the kind of situation that Antoine really prevails in because he's so intelligent and he's got a mastery of that data. He really goes into it heavily. But in the Bahrain race there was no radio, so he couldn't communicate with his team. They couldn't tell him, you're lapping too quickly or you're lapping too slowly for the tyres. So he was kind of just managing it himself, and also he had to decide when he was going to pit without a radio, so he couldn't communicate with the team when he was going to come in. And he started 11th on the grid and came up to 4th. So it was such a magnificent drive through the field without, his first race in F2, so many things happening around him, and, a lesser driver would have just panicked in that situation and thrown the race away. But he completely calmed cerebral in the car, working out, all right, my radio's broken. This is what needs to happen, A, B and C. I need to do this, this and this, and just worked through it in a systematic way. And I think that combined with the pace that he's shown, Monza we saw him win, which was, the pictures I think are the ones that people remember from Monaco, him stood on the car with the famous pose now where he goes like this, and then obviously Paul Ricard, he took the victory there the week after as well, so the win in Monaco and then the win in France as well, so fantastic to see. So Jake, part of the benefit of you being in Spa was the fact that you were covering Formula 1, so much more important than me. It also meant you got to be in the media pen and you got to speak to some of the drivers. I mean, I was already on the way to the airport by the time the Formula 1 race had finished. So tell us a little bit about the kind of things people were saying, who was saying, nice things about Antoine, because it was kind of universal really, wasn't it? It was almost like everyone had said something. He'd touched people that much. But can you remember some of the drivers who were talking about him?
I think the main ones that stand out are Charles Leclerc and Pierre Gasly, who Antoine knew very, very well. They raced together since they were very, very young and had gone up through the categories together. Of course, Pierre Gasly went to Charles Leclerc before the race and goes, please win this for Antoine. And he did, so I think it's quite a fitting result, really. Just so much love for Antoine in the paddock. I think you kind of tell that the drivers sort of almost didn't want to race, but they did because you can't forget this guy, honestly. So I think everyone loved how humble he was, just how much of an intelligent racer he was. He had Cyril Abiteboul and Christian Horner singing his praises in the paddock before the race. So, he's a man that sort of really touched many, many people. So it was so fantastic to see the Formula One paddock just come together in that moment. It was really quite something special.
And of course, Antoine was a Renault junior, as you can see by the picture here. And Alain Prost was talking about him before the race as well, and said that just the day before they'd sorted his Formula 2 programme out. And I was kind of coming at that from the other perspective, because I was, as it is this time of year, trying to work out what the teams are doing and who they're going to sign. And no doubt there's a maze of people leading you down alleyways about things that aren't true and rumours that aren't really going to happen. But Antoine was one that I'd written a story about not so long ago at the start of August. Most of the top teams were chasing after him and wanted to sign him. Obviously, as we mentioned before, his budget was always an issue. It was always a struggle for him to raise the budget, but it seemed like Renault had made that leap of faith, if you like, and really put Antoine into their future plans. So sad that we're not going to see him compete next year. Also really sad for the Arden team. You mentioned Christian Horner. He helped found the Arden team, and his dad Gary Horner runs the team. And then there's Kenny Kirwan, who you know very well from Formula 2 last year, who was obviously doing a lot of the arrangements after the race and making sure things are happening. So I'm looking forward to speaking to him a little bit and hearing his thoughts about Antoine. People that stood out for me were Jake Hughes, who you mentioned before, who he raced with last year, who said that Antoine was the most complete racer he's ever raced against. And if you have a spare few minutes, go back and have a look at some of the people Jake's raced against, because it's a long list and it's a very, very talented list of people that he's raced against. And also Matteo Zangarelli, who's the GP3 team manager from ART. It's actually his first year as the team manager last year, and he won the championship with Antoine, so that was fantastic. But Matteo had also driver coached Antoine as part of the FFSA programme from years back as well, so someone who he really knew well. And Antoine was at his wedding a month ago, so you know, so many people in the paddock had so many connections with Antoine, that he's such a fantastic person. I think the other thing we should mention is Juan Manuel Correa was involved in the crash as well, the Sauber junior team driver, who's an Alfa Romeo reserve driver as well. So he's reported as in a stable condition, but still in intensive care after some leg injuries. So we definitely send out our best to him. And Juan Manuel Correa, I think we could talk about him briefly as being a really underrated rookie. Obviously he was with Jensen last year in the championship you were covering, and Juan Manuel Correa, a very well-liked person in the paddock. What are your experiences of him from last year?
Yeah, from Juan Manuel, he's absolutely larger-than-life character, he really is. We were doing, when we were with F2 and GP3, every pre-race we do a sort of Facebook Live, we would do a Facebook Live thing. And he and Lando were our ones for Silverstone. So Lando was obviously a huge amount of attention, so he was getting loads of questions. And so Juan Manuel came on, he was getting loads of questions as well. He was just having so much fun. It's brilliant. So I really hope that he makes a really speedy recovery. He's just recently had his first Formula One test as well with Tatiana Calderon, who is of course a former teammate of his with Alfa Romeo. So yeah, wish him a really speedy recovery. Hope we see him in the paddock again soon. He's
got a really rapid teammate in Callum Ilott, so to be doing so well against him, scoring podiums and things like that, I think it's been a really positive year for him after such a difficult year with Jensen where so many things went wrong. And like you said, I really hope we see him back in the paddock soon. There's no doubt the paddock have lost a fantastic human being in Anthoine Hubert, as well as a potential future Formula One driver. I'm joined by all of the people at Motorsport Network in wishing our best to Antoine's family, his friends, his colleagues, the difficult time Arden must be having with another race weekend coming up this weekend in Monza, where Tatiana Calderon will race alone. Hubert's car will not be raced. So we pass on our best to them, and we wish Juan Manuel Correa the best for his recovery as well.